Pleasure it is to be here this morning with so many friends, with so many distinguished New Yorkers who have done so much good work. We start with Eleanor Tatum and the Amsterdam News, which is such an important voice and institution in this city, in this state, and in the political dialogue. She has kept it going. She has raised the decibel level of the voice, and we owe her a debt of gratitude and applause for the great job she's doing. We have all sorts of great labor leaders in the room today. Mario Salento, who is the president of the AFL-CIO. We have Chris Shelton, we have Bob Master, we have Arthur Cheliotis. Let's give them all a round of applause. We have great elected officials. We have honorees. Senator Andrea Stewart-Cousins is here. Pleasure to be with you. Melissa Mark Viverito. Borough President Ruben Diaz and I, who just spent a few days in Puerto Rico. We did a little work, but we had a lot of fun. Ruben Diaz is here. Speaker Melissa Mark Viverito, pleasure to be with her. She was in Puerto Rico also. Let me make a couple of quick points if I can, because we have a long program and I don't want to take too much of your time. But these are important times. These are difficult times. They're troubling times. They're emotionally powerful times. Big issues that this country is deciding, big issues that this state is deciding. Listening to the debates last night, which I don't know that you could really call them debates, because debates suggest an exchange of substantive ideas. So I don't know that that's what it was, but you hear the frankly absurdity of some of the proposals and how some candidates sense an anger and a frustration and are venting that anger and that frustration. And in politics, it's always easier to play to people's fears than hopes. It's always easier to fan the flames of insecurity and anxiety than to lift people up. And that's where we are now. And it's a very dangerous time, I think, for this country as it's making decisions. And that's why informed debate, intelligent voices, intelligent discussion like the Amsterdam News is so important. Eleanor and I do go way, way back. At one time, I was a young person. I know it's hard to believe, but I was a young person, and we do go way back, and we are in the same basic position that we are following the footsteps of giants. Wilbur Tatum, Mario Cuomo, who cast a very powerful legacy that Eleanor is continuing and I'm continuing. Bill Lynch Jr., Stacy Lynch are here. Bill Lynch, who is a friend of all of ours in this room, who is a great political consultant, political visionary, cast a long shadow and cast a long legacy, and they're following his legacy. And I think their pursuit is very important to remember this morning. They were all in the same business. Wilbur Tatum, Mario Cuomo, Bill Lynch. All in the same business. And it wasn't a business. It was a crusade that they were on. And the crusade was to make this place a better place. The crusade was to do justice in the fullest sense of the word, and to increase the level of justice and fairness and the level of opportunity. To take the principle that this country and this state were all about and make it a reality. That's what they were doing. And they all believed that justice in the truest form, and I'm not talking about criminal justice. We do criminal justice. We lock up more people than any industrialized nation on the globe. I don't even know that you can call that criminal justice. We pay to keep a person in prison the same amount it would cost to give them a Harvard education, which would be a lot smarter than spending the money incarcerating them. Their justice was a deeper, truer form of justice. They followed the justice of the Bible. They followed the justice of Martin Luther King, of John Kennedy, my father, of Teilhard de Chardin. True justice, social justice, racial justice, economic justice. That's what they were all about. Racial justice, that they would be offended today, frankly, to see that there is still racism alive and well, to see the tension between some of the police and some of the racial communities across this country and what's going on. But they would be proud to see that in New York we appointed the first special prosecutor in the United States to bring true justice. They would be offended to see, from a social justice point of view, what's happening in education, that we have two education systems in this state still, one for the rich and one for the poor. And depending on the zip code you live in, you go to a very different education system. And if you go to a rich district, you're going to have every advantage anyone could imagine. And if you go to live in a poor district, you can go to a failing school that has been failing for 10 years. And they would be offended by that. They would be offended when they looked at the front page of the Amsterdam News today and saw that Carrie Gabay, 43 years old, lost his life to gun violence. And they would say, how many young people have to die? How many times does this nation need to learn this lesson over and over and over again, almost on a weekly basis, that we have to get the guns off the street? It is absurd that this nation is stymied by the political opposition, which is irrational in this case. I understand the Second Amendment. I get it. You have a right to own a gun. Fine. Nobody's trying to take your legal right to own a gun away. We want to take the guns away from criminals and mentally ill. But to do that, you have to have background checks. Legal owners say, well, it's not me. I'm a legal owner. How do I know you're a legal owner? Unless I ask you, and unless I check everyone who's going to buy a gun. Now, they'd be pleased with us in New York that we passed the SAFE Act, the smartest gun control law in the United States of America. But they would also know that unless this nation passes a law, one state passing a law isn't enough. Because the guns aren't coming from New York anymore. They're coming from the South, they're coming from the other states where you can buy them and put them in the trunk of your car and drive in. And we lose Carrie Gabay, 43 years old, went from the projects in the Bronx to Harvard University, did everything right, did it all on his own, went to a private sector firm, did well, said, doing well isn't enough, I want to do good, and he came into government. And he was with us from the first year of my governorship. Lost his life by a random bullet that happened to hit him in the head. Random bullet. What a loss. No explanation. Total violation of justice and unnecessary. And they would be offended by what we're doing in terms of economic justice. Growing income inequality worse than ever before. Not that there is income inequality. We understand there's income inequality. People make different salaries. We're not socialists. But the gap is growing, and it's growing, and it's growing. And it's getting worse. Census data that just came out. You wonder why there's economic frustration. Between last year and this year, the wages for the median family were flat. Between this year and 2007, they actually went down 6%. That's what's fueling that economic anger that you're feeling in this political season. Now, Wilbur Tatum, Mario Cuomo, Bill Lynch also believe something else. Government can be the vehicle to make change. Government can be the instrumentality to do justice. They didn't want to be politicians. My father didn't want to be a politician. He didn't like the retail handshaking, kiss the baby. That was not who he was. But he believed that government was the vehicle to make change. Bill Lynch with David Dinkins. He wanted to be a political consultant. No, he wanted David Dinkins in a position to bring change. Wilbur Tatum, Amsterdam News, politically involved, editorial supporting candidates. Why? Because government is a vehicle to make change. And they were right. And it is still the most potent vehicle to make the biggest change in the fastest way possible, period. So we say we're going to take that government and we're going to use it as a vehicle in the crusade for justice to make change. You have an income inequality problem. You have people at the bottom end of the ladder who can't find a way up. We can fix that. There's a law called the minimum wage. FDR set it up. FDR said the minimum wage is not just a sustainable wage, not just so you could scrape by. It was a wage that gave you a decent living. So if you're working full-time, you can afford to raise your family in a decent condition. The minimum wage today is $8.75 an hour, $18,000 a year. It doesn't work in New York. It's simple math. You can't live on $18,000. Cost of housing is $11,000. Food is $9,000. Clothing is $6,000. It doesn't work at $8.75. Raise the minimum wage so if people work, they have an affordable way to live. We want to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour. And we're going to do it, and we're going to do it with our brothers. And we're going to do it with our brothers and sisters in the labor movement. Why? Because the labor movement built the middle class in this country. That's what it did. And that's what it can do again. You want to talk about a raison d'etre for the labor movement in this new economy? The labor movement can say, we built the middle class once, we're going to build it again. The way we're going to do that is raising the minimum wage for organized and unorganized worker, because they are the voice of the middle class. This political insanity where we now call the labor movement a special interest. How are they a special interest? They are the middle class. When did the middle class become a special interest? They happen to be called the people of the state of New York. And the last thing Mario Cuomo, Wilbur Tatum, and Bill Lynch believed was that this was New York. And they chose to fight their crusade in New York. They could have gone to Florida, gotten a suntan. They could have gone to California, learned to surf, or do whatever they do. They did it in New York. Why? Because New York was the progressive capital of the nation. Because things happened first in New York. Because New York had that group of progressives. And because when New York did it, the rest of the nation noticed, and the rest of the nation followed. So that we're going to take that minimum wage campaign, and we're going to put it on a flag, and raise it up to the top of the pole. And we're all going to hold that pole and say, this is the New York crusade for economic justice, $15. They would be smiling ear to ear today. That New York takes one of the most serious problems in this country and says, we're going to solve it, and then the rest of the country, you can follow our lead. That's what Mario Cuomo, Wilbur Tatum, and Bill Lynch would be saying this morning. They would be smiling, and if they smiled, they would make everyone in this room smile. Thank you, and God bless you.